Hello and welcome to Indus News Live from Islamabad. I'm Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. British MPs say the UK Parliament has a right to criticise India's handling of the farmers' protest. This comes after India summoned the British High Commissioner over debates on farmer protests in the UK Parliament. Meanwhile, Indian farmers have called for a nationwide strike on the 26th of March to mark 4 months of agitation. The US has imposed sanctions on 2 children of Myanmar's military leader Min Aung Hlaing and 6 companies they control. The US Treasury Department says the indiscriminate violence by Burma's security forces against protesters is unacceptable. Meanwhile, the UN Security Council has condemned violence in Myanmar and called on the army to show restraint. Yemen's army says it has partially broken Houthis' 6-year-long siege of the southern city of HOUTHIS. In an interview, a Yemeni military spokesperson said the army seized control of several mountain locations on the western edges of the city. Meanwhile, the Saudi-led Arab coalition said it destroyed Houthis' missile launcher in an airstrike in Marib province. In Brazil, the number of daily COVID-19 fatalities has hit another new high with 2,286 people dead overnight. Meanwhile, the U.S. Congress has passed President Joe Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief bill. In Pakistan, more than 2,200 tested positive and 53 died overnight, with the death toll climbing over 13,300. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 2.6 million lives and infected over 117 million people so far. Well, these were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now the news in detail. British MPs say the UK Parliament has the right to criticise India's handling of the farmers' protest. This comes after India summoned the British High Commissioner over debates on farmers' protests in the UK Parliament. In a statement, the Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Leila Moran, said what was discussed in Parliament was the power of democracy. She added the Indian government should have respect for the UK's democratic traditions. Earlier on Tuesday, the debate was called after more than 100,000 people had petitioned Parliament to discuss the protest. Liberal Democrat councillor Gurt Singh, who has Indian origin, had created the petition. In the 90-minute debate, British lawmakers criticised the reforms and urged Prime Minister to take up the issue at the G7 summit in June. Meanwhile, Indian farmers have called for a nationwide strike on the 26th of March to mark 4 months of agitation. Over 250 farmers have died during their agitation since November last year. Pakistan's President Arif Alvi says India is creating a war hysteria against China. He was addressing the upgradation ceremony of Air War College Institute in Karachi. The president said India fooled the world by portraying its 1974 nucleus test as peaceful explosion. Arif Alvi praised the professionalism of Pakistan Air Force. He said Pakistan's conduct against Indian strikes was a display of morality, skill and intelligence. He added Pakistan has always pursued peace with India. Pakistan's Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa has offered security cooperation to Bahrain. He was speaking to the Bahrain National Guard commander during his visit to the country. In a statement, the military's media wing said the two sides discussed regional security situation. The army chief also held delegation-level talks on the recent developments in the Afghan peace process. The talks focused on key steps to be taken to facilitate an Afghan-led and Afghan-owned peace process. The Director General of Inter-Services Intelligence, Lieutenant General Faiz Hamid, was also present in the meeting. The U.S. has imposed sanctions on 2 children of Myanmar's military leader Min Aung Hlaing and 6 companies they control. The U.S. Treasury Department said the indiscriminate violence by Burma's security forces against protesters is unacceptable. In a statement, Secretary of State Antony Blinken warned more punitive actions could follow. He also condemned the detention of over 1,700 and killing over 60 people. Meanwhile, the UN Security Council has condemned violence in Myanmar and called on the army to show restraint. However, the Security Council stopped short of threatening possible further action. In Myanmar, protesters have again taken to the streets in several cities, defying a brutal crackdown by security forces. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken will meet with his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi on March 18 in Alaska. The White House says the meeting will be an opportunity to address a wide range of issues, including deep disagreements. This will be the first high-level in-person contact between the two sparring countries under the Biden administration. During a congressional hearing, Blinken said the meeting is a chance to lay out U.S. concerns with Beijing in frank terms.
This is an important opportunity for us to lay out in very frank terms the many concerns that we have with Beijing's actions and behavior that are challenging the security, the prosperity, and the values of the United States and our partners and allies. So we intend to raise, and we will raise, the host of issues, some of which have already been touched on today, that concern us.
Meanwhile, Blinken and U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin are also set to travel to Japan and South Korea next week. And now moving on, 27 people have died after a bus carrying dozens of pilgrims plunged down a steep abyss on Indonesia's Java Island. Authorities say the victims also include junior high school students. They said rescuers worked through the night using cranes to save 39 injured survivors from the wreckage. They said the bus carrying 66 passengers was traveling on a winding and poorly lit road when it plunged down the 20-meter ravine. It was returning from a religious pilgrimage site in West Java. Yemen's army says it has partially broken Houthis' 6-year-long siege of the southern city of Taiz. In an interview, a Yemeni military spokesperson said the army seized control of several mountain locations on the western edges of the city. He said the forces have also been successful in reopening a road to western areas on the Red Sea. Yemeni troops have recently launched a new offensive in Taiz and have broken months of military stalemate with the Houthis. Meanwhile, the Saudi-led Arab coalition says it destroyed Houthis' missile launcher in an airstrike in Marib province. The coalition released video footage showing the strike on SAM-6 missile launcher at a warehouse. Japan has urged Iran to adhere to the 2015 nuclear agreement. Japanese Foreign Minister Toshimitsu Motegi held a telephonic conversation with Iranian counterpart Javad Zarif. In a statement, Japan's foreign ministry said Toshimitsu asked Zarif to take a constructive approach to U.S. President's initiative to revive talks. It said the foreign minister also expressed concerns over Iran halting expansions by UN nuclear watchdog. Toshimitsu said Japan will continue diplomatic efforts drawing on an alliance with the U.S. and a friendly relationship with Iran. Meanwhile, Iranian state media said Zarif said Tehran is ready to resume its commitments if others start fulfilling theirs. Earlier, U.S. Secretary of State opposed the release of Iran's billions of dollars from South Korea until it returns to full compliance with the deal. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says Washington will maintain its support for the Lebanese army under President Joe Biden's administration. Testifying in front of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, Blinken also pledged support for Lebanese educational institutes. Blinken also affirmed backing for the plans to continue support for the refugee camps that dominate Lebanon. Lebanon's interior minister has warned that country's security forces are drained and unable to fulfill their duties. Meanwhile, the energy minister also said Lebanon faces a total power outage by this month's end if much-needed funds are not approved. The financial meltdown and political deadlock in Lebanon have also prompted several protests throughout the country. In Brazil, the number of daily COVID-19 fatalities has hit another new high, with 2,286 people dead overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 2.6 million lives and infected over 117 million people so far. Details in the following report. After a full year since the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a global pandemic, the new coronavirus is still going strong, claiming thousands of lives every day. A new wave of COVID-19 is ripping through Brazil, pushing hospitals and ICUs toward collapse and claiming record numbers of daily deaths. In the U.S., although life has started to move towards some semblance of normalization in several states, health officials have warned of fresh surges as more infectious variants of the virus continue to spread. Meanwhile, both houses of the Democrat-dominated Congress fulfilled their campaign promise of the COVID-19 relief package.
We Democrats made promises, particularly we did in the Senate. We said if we won those 2 seats in Georgia, we would get things done. Mitch McConnell blocked bills 4 times in a row. And Mr. Ossoff and Mr. Warnock told the citizens of Georgia if they were elected, they would make sure that the actual promises made would be promises kept, and they have been. So this is a wonderful day for America.
In Europe, 5 states have suspended the use of AstraZeneca vaccine following 2 deaths in Austria, allowing EU's medicine agency to conduct an investigation. In Turkey, daily infections have risen to the highest level, 10 days after President Tayyip Erdogan announced an easing of measures to curb the pandemic. Meanwhile, Australia has unveiled $928 million tourism support package to boost local travel while international routes remain closed.
800,000 tickets to ride for Australians to go out and ensure that they can experience this amazing country. That's what this is about. To keep people in their jobs, we've got to put planes in the air and we've got to put tourists on the ground. The Australian tourism industry needs more tourists. They want to get on and run the businesses and welcome the tourists.
In Asia, South Korea is set to extend vaccinations for people aged 65 years and older with AstraZeneca's vaccine to ramp up its immunization drive. And over in Middle East, Palestine has registered highest single-day COVID-19 fatalities since the beginning of the pandemic. COVID-19 has claimed 53 more lives in Pakistan overnight, raising the death toll to 13,277. The Health Ministry reported 2,258 new cases in the last 24 hours. The ministry said so far over 597,000 people have tested positive for the disease. It said more than 566,000 have recovered from COVID-19 so far. The ministry said there are over 17,000 active cases in the country. It added 1,688 patients are in critical condition. And now it's time to take a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Palestinian group Hamas has re-elected Yahya Sinwar as its president in the Gaza Strip for 4 years. He defeated a prominent Hamas leader, Nazar Abdullah, following an intense contest. Sinwar was freed in a 2011 prisoner swap with Israel after spending over 20 years behind bars. Hamas has yet to elect a leader for the Israeli-occupied West Bank, whose identity will be kept secret. Chief of Hamas Political Bureau and overall leader Ismail Haniyeh congratulated Sinwar in a statement. Haniyeh said the movement's commitment to elections every 4 years confirmed its deep faith in the principle of rotating power. Turkey says the second round of talks with Greece will be held in Athens on the 16th of March to address maritime disputes. Officials say the talks will be held ahead of an EU summit later this month, where the leaders will discuss the dispute. The two NATO members are at odds over energy rights and claims over Mediterranean waters. The status of some Aegean islands is also among a host of disagreements. The talks were resumed in January after a 5-year hiatus. The United Nations has denounced the deadly police operations in Venezuela. The UN investigators say they are looking into 200 killings allegedly committed by the country's police forces this year. UN fact-finding mission head Marta Valina said preliminary investigations indicate that some of those killed were victims of extrajudicial executions. Valina said authorities have failed to release death certificates even after charging fees for autopsies. Today marks the 10th anniversary of a massive earthquake and a tsunami that triggered triple nuclear meltdowns in Fukushima, Japan. Thousands lost their lives while tens of thousands had to evacuate in the aftermath. Years on, Fukushima residents recall the traumatic experience but also speak about hopes for the future. More in this report. An earthquake in 2011 caused one of history's worst nuclear accidents at Fukushima Daiichi plant in Japan, leaving over 20,000 people dead or missing. 160,000 people evacuated as Tokyo Electric Power Company plant's reactors began to melt down. The government is encouraging residents to return with financial aid as it decontaminates land. Lingering worries about the nearby nuclear plant, lacks of jobs and poor infrastructure, however, is keeping many away. Nevertheless, as the memories of the terrible incident gradually fade away, local residents are positive about the future ahead. Toshihara Unado, a 13th-generation potter living in a town close to the nuclear plant, were forced to flee when the massive earthquake struck. Now, with restrictions relaxed, the unique pottery has finally come back home as Unado is planning to open a new workshop in downtown Nami.
I would like to pass a Borisoma Yaki, a tradition with a history of more than 300 years, to the next generations. It is my goal. I hope that it could be carried on by as many people as possible.
Meanwhile, famous singer Lady Gaga also sent her wishes to the people of Japan and praised them for their efforts. She said their conduct amid the Fukushima disaster is a source of hope for everyone during the testing times of the ongoing pandemic. Asia-Pacific markets are trading higher, following a strong finish on Wall Street overnight after U.S. lawmakers passed the coronavirus relief package. South Korea's Kospi is leading the gains, jumping over 2%. Mainland Chinese bourses have also climbed nearly 2%, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index has also ascended over 1%. Japan's Nikkei 225 has added over 0.5% as well. The ASX 200 in Australia is trading flat. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.